Welcome back. Today's talk is titled, Why We Need to Be Understood. I have what I lovingly refer to as the teacher wound, aka the overexplainer's mind. And one of the ways it shows up is through this need to constantly overexplain myself. I have to make every motive clear. Every reason and decision needs to be understood, and every gray area is colored and clarified. Maybe you know someone like this. Hell, maybe it's you. And if it is, I'll probably hear about it in the comment section. Now, I do get the irony of me overexplaining, but let's set that aside for a moment. So where does it begin? Let's pull this thread and unravel this sweater. Usually somewhere in childhood or early life, there was an unstable or unavailable or emotionally distant adult. So we as a child did something authentic, something natural to us, and maybe it was met with resistance, judgment, criticism, withdrawal, or some sort of shame. Maybe love got pulled back, or maybe attention disappeared. Perhaps we were made to feel wrong for simply being who we were. On a personal note, I grew up in a deeply religious household, and my mom would receive this magazine that would tell her which movies or music were good and which ones were demonic. And I remember hiding many albums under my bed, literally praying they wouldn't be found. There were so many parts of myself that I hid. Music, curiosity, desire, expression, anything that might get labeled as sinful, dangerous, or wrong. So if you grew up in a strict religious household, you might know what I'm talking about. And whether your version was religion, criticism, emotional instability, or just this constant feeling that you had to manage the adults around you, the lesson was the same. Be careful what you show. Be careful what you say. Be careful being who you are. And that is where this need to be understood can begin. So in that moment where we feel rejected for being authentic, our self starts trying to solve a very tricky problem. This feeling of rejection sucks. How do I get back to safety? How do I get back to the place where I don't feel like I've just been banished from the tribe? So we start trying out different tactics. We defend, we justify, we clarify. We search for this perfect arrangement of words so the other person will be like, I get you. Now I finally understand. And beneath all of it is this unconscious equation. If I can just explain myself well enough, then I'll be understood. If I'm understood, then I'll be safe. That's the wound. And that's the math of it. Now, not every desire to be understood is coming from a wounded place. Sometimes we just want to be sincerely met. We want to share something and have it connect. That's completely human and normal in any relationship. The wound begins when being understood stops feeling like a desire and starts feeling like a requirement to find peace. Almost like you have to compulsively explain why you deserve to even exist. And in that way, what looks like truth sharing is often a strategy for finding safety. I know there were many times in my life where I felt this need to constantly explain myself. And I didn't understand why. But if I'm being honest, I don't know if I really even thought about it much till recently. It was just something I unconsciously did. It was who I was. The defense pattern was so ingrained in me, I didn't know any differently. Even so, it could still lead to these embarrassing conclusions and a huge inability to let go. Like when something was over, even when I knew it was for the best, I still wanted the last word. I still desperately wanted to be understood. I wanted some kind of resolution, some kind of closure, some kind of final conversation where everything would click into place and I would finally feel peace. But that closure was never coming. Classic example, and we are going to fully embrace the cringe here. I had a toxic relationship that ended. And even though I knew it needed to end, even though a deeper part of me was saying, this is for the best, I still couldn't let go. And here's a quick tangent about the power of the deeper knowing in action. Every time I go through a major life change, I get a new laptop. And every time I get a new laptop, I put on some decals or a custom cover on it. Well, recently I found the laptop from that time period. And looking at it, I had bought a sticker of Snow White with the bandana over her face. And she's holding out a poisoned apple. And next to her is the Banksy rat holding a sign that said, "Get out while you still can." So apparently, some deeper part of me knew exactly what was going on. My subconscious was not being subtle at all. Poison apple, get out. And even with that staring in the face, I still couldn't let go. Even though I was glad it was over, I kept writing. It was, poor little naive Jason. because I convinced myself it was romantic. I told myself that even though the relationship was a mess, our love went across space and time. Our love crossed multiple lifetimes. Maybe time apart was just what we needed. Maybe we had to spend this time away to find ourselves. We had the soul contract, right? This is what I had signed up for. So I wrote letter after letter, email after email, desperately trying to make her understand my point of view, desperately trying to get even a morsel, a crumb of attention or understanding. One moment I wanted her to understand just how much she'd hurt me, and the next moment I was apologizing for things I wasn't even sorry for or hadn't done, pretending like I had had these huge revelations in the months since we had broken up, like I'd become this completely new person. Meanwhile, she had jumped into a new relationship practically the next day. And this is what this need to be understood can do. It can make you keep reaching back into a place that life has been trying to pull you out of. It can make you mistake obsession with love. It can make you call it closure when what you really want is control. It can make you believe that if you just find the perfect words, the perfect explanation, the perfect emotional argument, then they'll finally see. Because that's how wounds work. Some small part of me believed that if I could just explain it well enough, she would finally see the damage she had done to me. She would understand me. And somehow that understanding would resolve the pain. But it never does. Because most of the time we're not actually looking for understanding. We're looking for the person who hurt us to be the person that heals us. And that is a very different thing. And the worst part is there was another girl. A wonderful girl who actually loved me. The one I left for the toxic relationship. And she did things all the time to show me that she actually cared. She left me notes in my book bag. She greeted me with special dinners. She showed me with genuine affection. But I was so averse to feeling loved and accepted that when she did it, I felt suspicious, unworthy, undeserving. Like something was wrong, like there had to be a catch. I quite literally and physically pushed her away. Because I didn't feel deserving or worthy of the kind of love that was actually available. But I could spend hours and weeks trying to get understanding from a person who wasn't available at all. And that's the pattern. We reject the love that is present because it feels unfamiliar. Then we chase the love that is absent because it feels like a familiar home. And all of that over-explaining we do, all of that trying to make the other person see it, it doesn't resolve the pain. It doesn't. And as I became more aware, I started to see the pattern everywhere. In partners, bosses, family, politics, relationships. Why can't you see what I'm saying? Why can't you understand why this matters to me? Why can't you understand me? And what we often fail to realize is the charge behind this is not always truth. Sometimes it might just be that old search for safety, the need to be right, or to stay in control. Sometimes it is the need to be seen as the one who knows. And sometimes it's just the discomfort with uncertainty. But in all those cases, explanation stops being just a simple expression of truth and becomes a way of trying to regulate ourselves through other people. And you see this online too. People rush to refine, correct, or assert their right version of things. Well, actually, it's this. Sure, sometimes genuine clarification is needed and important, but often it's the ego trying to regain footing through being right, visible, special, or in control. But the hard truth is that some people are simply not wired to hear you in the way that you want to be heard. And it has nothing to do with your ability to explain yourself. They are just where they are. Just because you have clarity does not mean they have capacity. It's like we talked about in the last talk. Just because I know what to do for my hurt shoulder, it does not mean that my shoulder is able or willing. My clarity is not met with its current capacity. And that is one of the most painful realizations a person can have, and also one of the most liberating. Because once you truly see that, you stop wasting your life trying to force closed ears to open. And healing begins when you realize this. I do not need to be understood by everyone in order to be safe. I do not need to prove myself in order to be worthy of love. And I do not need to keep performing my truth for people that do not have the capacity to receive it. And when I say capacity, I don't mean this like hierarchy. I don't mean one person is above another. And I don't mean it as they're unconscious, they're asleep, I'm awakened, I'm above them. I get it, they don't. And that's just usually the spiritual ego trying to make itself feel special. I like to think of it less as hierarchy and more like curriculum. We may just be taking different classes. You may be speaking from one lived set of lessons and they may be speaking from another. You keep trying to hand them your material like, here, read this, it'll explain everything. but they haven't taken that class yet. And at the same time, maybe they're trying to hand you theirs. So the mismatch is natural. It happens. But no amount of forcing your curriculum on someone else is going to make you feel safe, because the safety you're looking for was never going to come from winning the conversation. It comes from no longer needing everyone else to understand your lesson before you're allowed to trust it. And even if they did understand you for a moment, the deeper wound would still be there, because the real healing was never in finally being heard by them. It was in no longer abandoning yourself when they couldn't hear you. And part of the understanding that we're all taking different classes is accepting that sometimes people move on. They leave conversations, they leave relationships, they leave the version of life where you thought they were supposed to understand you. And when you stop trying to force understanding, when you stop trying to control how you are perceived in every mind, especially in the minds of those who leave, a real peace can begin to emerge. And it's not because everyone finally sees you clearly, but because you no longer need them to. You no longer have to prove yourself. And you no longer have to keep handing out your curriculum to people who are never going to read it. And for a chronic overexplainer, that's often where freedom begins. So with that said, be kind to yourself, and I'll talk to you again soon.